5 years ago when I started my crafting journey, I built a whole bunch of scatter terrain pieces first, but then I was ready to dip my toe into the world of building making. This is the very first building that I made, and I know that there's a lot of things wrong with it. So this week on the Storycraft Society, I want to revisit this building, and with 5 years of crafting experience under my belt, see how much better of an end result I can get. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin, and this is another exciting episode of the Storycraft Society, and it's actually a unique one this time because I was actually over watching Brent at Goobertown Hobbies, and I saw an episode on his channel where he actually repaints miniatures that he made as a kid, but he does them now. That just got all the gears turning in my head, and as I looked over on the shelf and I saw this number, of course, when I look at this building, I have a whole bunch of nostalgia wrapped up in it, but also there's a lot of things that I did wrong just because I didn't have the experience and I didn't exactly know what I was doing, but also I took shortcuts and I was lazy about certain things. So this video is actually gonna be a little different than the normal videos that I put out on the channel. It's gonna be a little bit more vloggy of a style video, but the big difference is that instead of going step by step into a tutorial of how I make the new building, I'm gonna just go through and point out things on this that I wish I would have done different and that I'm fixing on the new building. I'm doing a lot of jibber jabbering. I'm a big jibber jabberer. So let's get into crafting. So the first thing that I want to talk about that I messed up a lot as an early crafter with my buildings was scale. Scale is a topic that absolutely could get its own entire video, and I'm definitely not going to go super in depth into it today, but I am going to say that when I first started crafting a 6x6 footprint, was the size that I made all of my buildings. It looked really nice on the table, or at least I thought it did. The thing that I didn't consider is what that means if you're using a 1-inch grid. A 6-inch by 6-inch building is 30 foot by 30 foot. Do you want to know how big 30 feet is? This is 30 feet. A medieval peasant is not going to have a building this big. This is like a mansion or something. 30 feet. Too big. So when I make my new version of this house, instead of going 6x6, I want it to still have the spirit of this house. So I'm gonna go down to 5x5. I'm gonna get those pieces cut up and then we're gonna move on to the next thing. So now that we got the scale situation figured out, the next thing we're going to talk about is the brickwork. So the brickwork is the next big thing that I think really holds this building back. And if you're a fan of the channel or you've been watching for a while, you'll know that I like gluing down my bricks individually. I think that's the best way to get the best looking brick on any surface for a tabletop build. But back then it felt like too big of a task to individually glue bricks down, so I tried to carve them. So in the spirit of this build, I'm going to carve my bricks on my new building as well. When I did this one, all I did was I went in with a pencil and drew out my bricks. When you do that, it leaves a line, and it is a fairly indented line, but the problem is that once you get your Mod Podge and your base coat and your paint and stuff on it, it starts to fill in these gaps. So the trick that I like to use for carving bricks now that I didn't use back then is I'm gonna go in with an X-Acto knife and I'm gonna score a very shallow line, and then I'm gonna go in with my pencil and widen that line. And now it's a much, much deeper groove, and the bricks are gonna stand up to getting all kinds of paint and all kinds of Mod Podge and all that. So now that we got the substructure done, the next thing to talk about is the windows. So basically what I did was I went in with an X-Acto knife and tried to cut out a flat, kind of lowered area that would be my window, I guess, and then I painted them out in black so that hopefully it looked like there was a hole there, which is just not the way to do it. And then I put on these shutters, I guess. What I decided to do for this build to really step it up is two things. One, I cut all the way through the foam, popped the little piece, the little rectangle of the window window out and then shaved off the front of it, pushed it back in and glued it in place. That way I got a completely flat surface. The other thing is I'm going to be using my windows from shiftinglands.com. I cannot speak highly enough of this product. I made windows for myself for a while, and the first time I bought these things, holy crap, I was like, I'm never gonna make a window again because they just make life so much easier. That is that for my windows. Now we need to move on to talking about fascia boards. So definitely another way that a building looks a little bit more hastily built when it doesn't need to be built that way is to not have any fascia boards. This is what a fascia board is. So technically this part of the building is the fascia board right here, but this overhang is generally what I'm talking about. This thing, basically. Doesn't have to stick out this far. And the whole point of those fascia boards is to make it so the rain that comes down off of the roof doesn't just drip down into your windows so that it would fall off and land in the ground over here. And it just goes a long way in making a building not look really hastily constructed and kind of boring and flat. So the way that we're gonna do that on our new build is two ways. One, we're gonna talk about a little later, but for right now, I cut 2 strips of 3/8 by 3/8 foam, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna glue that on to the outside after texturing it up to look like wood, and then that's what our shingle boards are going to rest on so that then the water would... Boy, this is difficult. So that the rain will run down off of our roof and then fall off the side of our roof there. Next up in the issues we have to talk about, the trim. So with the exception of these 2 boards right here, every single piece of trim or rafter board or whatever that I used on this build was the exact same size, which was 3/4 of an inch, and then I tried to kind of curve cut the sides to make them look slightly different. I think that that is definitely a mistake that I made, that it was just easier to cut a whole bunch of 3/4 inch boards and just slap them on instead of giving each individual section its right amount of time and dedication. So what we're gonna do with our new build is all around the upper triangle and all across the front here, we're gonna be doing 3/8 of an inch boards. And then any place that we're doing trim over top of the brick, we're gonna do all of those in 1/4 inch. So now that size difference of trim board will really give the piece a dynamic range that when you're looking at one spot, it doesn't look the same as another spot. So that's next. Let's get a whole bunch of those cut up and get them all glued on. Hopefully this thing will be looking great after that. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about is the roof of our building. Before we get to that, I'm gonna take one extra step that's really gonna make our new building look a lot better than this old one. So one of my favorite builds that I've ever done is this little farm cottage here. And what I decided to do was put these sticks in to be rafters. So what I've decided that I'm going to do is do rafters just like that. They're going to come up and out of the top here, and then that way it'll look like they're running underneath, supporting the roof. The real sticks really make a huge difference in making the piece look a lot more realistic, and it's another texture that breaks up all of the foam in a really positive way. All right, so with the rafters done, I went ahead and put some upper boards up here, and I also took some EPS expanded polystyrene foam in here. That's just the crappy stuff that you get out of like packaging containers that breaks up and has the little like bubbles in it. That is always gonna go in as my substructure so I don't waste my expensive XPS foam. But so now that I have those two things, I did remember one thing going back to the windows that I forgot to mention. That another mistake that I made with the older building is that I put all the windows as square as possible. I think that this is definitely something that I tended to early on because of, you know, me being a little OCD about something or whatever. But what it does is it ends up making the house look too birdhousey and symmetrical. So a good way to break that up is to take, and if you're going to put a window on a side of the house, don't put it in the dead center, don't measure it out, just put it somewhere where you think that it looks good. With that being said, the next thing that we need to head to is getting our shingle boards put up on the roof. So let's look at those. So another glaringly obvious mistake on this build that I made was these roof planks are all just crazy thick. They almost look like stairs if you look at them in the right direction. And so actually, let me grab a miniature real quick. So if you take this miniature and look at his hand in the scale of the size of the thickness of these boards, I mean, you can see it's just ridiculous. It would be like my hand and the plank sits up this tall. So what I can do instead is slice these down a lot thinner so that they rest down and look a lot better. So I'm gonna now go cut up a bunch of roof planks like this, and then I'm going to throw that onto our new roof. You know it, you love it, time lapse time. All right, so the final structural thing that I'm gonna change with the new building compared to this one is the door. And I'm gonna be real with everybody. This door is like the hardest part of this entire build for me to show up close, because honestly, I don't even know what I was doing when I built it. My best guess is that I just got so bored by the time I finished the entire piece. It was the last thing that I probably had to do. And then I just started cutting into it with an X-Acto knife, all kinds of nicks. It doesn't even really look like a door. So in the new build, what I did was I took the same approach as the window, where I cut the entire piece out, shaved off the front, and then re-glued it back in place to get me my door boards. And then now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take thin pieces of XPS and make a Z pattern on the door. That's gonna be the braces that hold all the door boards together. And then lastly, I took a string and saturated it with PVA glue to make like a little knot handle, and then that is going to hang down off the front of the door there. That actually won't go in until after everything else is painted, because this already looks like string and doesn't need any paint on it. That's all I'm going to do to get the door finished, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so with the door being finished, we are done with the building and the construction of this building. So all we have left to do is one small thing and one big thing. The small thing is that we need to pour the UV resin that's gonna go into our window frames that are going to make our windows. That's something that's gonna take me just a couple of minutes, no big deal. The big thing that I've gotta do is I've gotta get this thing painted up. Now, I'm not gonna showcase all of the steps of that because I'm gonna be using the same techniques that I've used in a lot of other videos, but I will say that if this style video is interesting to you and you would like to see me do maybe a video like this, but not on the construction process, but on the painting process of what I've learned over 5 years, definitely let me know in the comment section below. And if enough people are interested in seeing a video about that, I would be glad to make it. So the next thing that's gonna be up is just some comparison glamour shots of these two things sitting side by side, and then we'll get to the outro of the video. Here we go. All right, so there you have it. What a unique and fun experience this video was. It's just so rewarding to be able to look back and see what I was capable of when I first started crafting compared to me crafting now. And the coolest part about this whole thing is that this kind of had a time constraint on it, so I didn't spend as many hours on it as I could have, and I still ended up with a result that's that much better in comparison. Hopefully that's a lesson for all you new crafters out there. Just give it some time, keep building stuff, and you will get better. It's just so cool to be able to look back and see the comparison. A huge thank you goes out to Brent from Goobertown Hobbies. If it wasn't for his video, I definitely wouldn't have made this one. So like I said earlier, his video that I got this idea from will be linked in the description below. If you enjoy this content, definitely leave me a like and a comment down below. If you're new to the channel, or if you're not new to the channel, let me know what kind of content is getting you excited about coming back to the Storycraft Society. The type of content that you guys want to see is the content that I want to make, so that'll be awesome to hear. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, definitely do that and hit that notification bell if you want to know when our videos go live every week, which is Thursdays Eastern Standard Time at noon. If you know a friend that would enjoy this video or any of my videos, definitely share this with them. That'll grow the Storycraft Society family, and it would definitely help the channel out a lot, so I would appreciate any reach that I can get. But with that said, that's all I've got for this week's video, so until next week, I'll be seeing you.